Hey everybody, and welcome to another segment of AstrologyAnswers.com's weekly forecast. My name is Terence. The week begins on Monday, September the 18th, 2023. This is the last week of summer in the northern latitudes and the last week of winter. You're below the equator. But let's start with Monday, September the 18th. The moon is in Scorpio. The moon sets the emotional tone. Scorpio is all or nothing, passionate, assertive, but it also rules the underworld. So it's really good for studying, for researching. By mid-afternoon Pacific time, that emotional moon will be in harmony with communication Mercury. Very good for writing, very good for expressing your feelings, very good if you are having an astrology reading or in a counseling session because you're more comfortable expressing, your feelings. Now, Tuesday, the moon continues in Scorpio, but the sun will be opposite Neptune. Of course, this happens once a year. Opposite is interacting with others. But when the focus of interacting with others is on Neptune, well, the positive is others can really inspire you. But usually you're seeing a certain amount of misunderstandings, maybe some disappointments with the Neptune. The moon in Scorpio, by early evening, around 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Pacific time, the moon will be opposite Uranus. Uranus is all this unpredictable energy, can be very innovative energies. But this could indicate around early evening Pacific time, some unexpected, that's Uranus, emotional upsets, emotional triggers. And with the sun opposite Neptune, that might be finding out some disappointments. Neptune can be, in the worst case scenario, deceptive. There could be betrayal. So you might find out that somebody has not been completely honest with you, and it hits you with this emotional upset by early evening Pacific time. On Wednesday, the moon enters outgoing Sagittarius. When the moon's in Scorpio, it's more private. When the moon goes into Sagittarius, it's more adventurous, outgoing. The moon goes into Sagittarius at 7:06 a.m. Pacific time, but by 11 a.m., around 11 a.m. into noon, the moon will be in a square or a difficult aspect to restricted Saturn. So that moon Saturn, you might be worrying too much. There may be some emotional frustrations. Just keep in mind that this too shall pass. It's only strong for an hour or two. I wouldn't be trying to have an important business meeting or have a heartfelt conversation around that time because you might be emotionally frustrated. Also, by midday on Wednesday, the sun will now be in the best flow of energy called a trine to Pluto. That sun positive with Pluto is a really good period for letting go. Could be a good period for discovering secrets, which is also really good for doing research and investigation. It is really favorable for any type of self-improvement through psychology counseling. On Thursday, the sun continues in harmony with Pluto for the first half of the day, Pacific time. The moon in Sagittarius, outgoing, playful Sagittarius, will be in harmony with Mars and in harmony with Venus by mid-afternoon Pacific time. Venus and Mars can be very romantic social energies, can also be very creative energies. And with the moon in Sagittarius, there's a lot of optimism, socializing, upbeat energies, mid-afternoon. Friday on the 22nd, it's going to be the autumn solstice, equinox, the autumn equinox, or the spring equinox if you're down under. This is not occurring until 11:50 p.m. Pacific time. So a lot of the world, it's really happening on on Saturday, the 23rd. But let's start with the beginning of the day. The moon in outgoing Sagittarius is going to be in a stressful angle to Virgo, the sun in Virgo, because it's the last day the sun's in Virgo before it goes into Libra, and that is the autumn equinox. Equinox means equal daylight, equal nighttime. So it's going to be 12 hours of light, 12 hours of darkness, and then every 4 minutes, every day after that, about the sun gets a little bit darker or sets a little bit sooner every 4 minutes. But when the moon is in a challenging aspect to the sun, it really brings up a lot of our old emotional patterns. Good, though, for exploring them. But by 1:21 p.m. Pacific time, the moon leaves outgoing Sagittarius, playful Sagittarius, and moves into conservative, practical, organized Capricorn for 2.5 days. And by 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific time, that Capricorn moon will be in harmony with Saturn. Saturn is the planet that's rules or associated with Capricorn. So to have the moon in harmony with Saturn, with the moon in Capricorn, this is a really good time period to feel really grounded, really organized, good for business. And by 11:50 p.m. Pacific time, the sun leaves analytical, sensible Virgo and moves into Libra, whether it's the autumn equinox or the spring equinox. Because when the sun goes into Libra for those next 4 weeks, it's putting more of an influence overall with harmony. That's Libra, for seeking win-win situations. Libra is the sign of relationships. On Saturday, the 23rd, as the moon continues in Capricorn through most of the weekend, the moon will be in harmony with communication Mercury, late morning Pacific time. Really favorable for business meetings, for being really very disciplined with expressing your ideas, whether you're pitching for a sales presentation, interviewing, a job offer, if you're trying to write, all forms of communications run more smoothly and much more disciplined and organized with the moon in Capricorn. By mid-afternoon Pacific time, now the moon will also be in harmony with Jupiter. Now, that could be a really good time for traveling or for making travel plans. Jupiter also rules teaching and education. So you could be much more upbeat and optimistic about those areas. But we're going into a Saturday evening, and the moon is that emotional response. And Jupiter is very optimistic. It's very upbeat. So it's really very good period, a good Saturday evening for going out and having a lot of fun. But by 8, 9 p.m. Pacific time, The moon will be in tension with Mars. That might be a certain amount of irritability. And if it's a Saturday night and you're drinking, that could be one example where you might be a bit irritable and argumentative, but this too shall pass. Sunday, as the moon continues in Capricorn, it's going to be in harmony with inspirational Neptune, late morning Pacific time. That can be a very favorable time for spiritual practices, religious practices, charity. Moon Neptune can be very intuitive. You want to trust your hunches, your inner voice. By 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time, the moon is crossing over Pluto. Now, that moon to Pluto, you can go really deep into introspection and meditation, but it can also be a time when it's bringing up a lot of concerns and worries emotionally, bringing it to the surface. But the moon in Capricorn, very practical Capricorn, will leave and enter into kind of humanitarian, quirky, innovative Aquarius at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, and be in harmony with the sun in Libra by early evening, because moon in Aquarius is an air sign, Libra is an air sign. But when the sun and the moon are in harmony, most things go more easily, more effortlessly, and also being both air signs, it's good for ideas, it's good for communications. So I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you next week with my next segment. Until then, be safe and well.